Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Club podcast. I am your host, Nick Leach, and today we're going to be diving into episode 5 of HBO's The Last of Us. If this is your first time to the podcast, the Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies, every episode we invite one member of the Cinema Club to be our co-host for the week, and they will choose the movie for that episode and join us on the podcast to talk about the film. And just to be completely clear before we get any further, I want to give a big spoiler warning because we are going to be talking about anything and everything about the show. So with that, enjoy.
You might not be her father, but you were someone's.
Things have gone great. Kansas City is free. You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him?
Be careful who you put your faith in.
You trust me?
There's no halfway with this. We finish what we started.
And as usual, we have Chris and Paige joining us today to talk about episode 5. Guys, can you believe we're already more than halfway through at this point?
Hey, what's up? I'm actually super depressed that we're almost done with it because now we have to wait until season 2 starts. But I'm actually really excited to talk about this episode because it was the most action-packed one that we've had so far. And let me tell you that it was epic. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's definitely bittersweet. You know, jumping into the episode 5 review, being over halfway through the season already. But yeah, this episode was terrific. So I'm excited. Jump into it.
And I will just preface this entire episode. I know I was ragging on episode 4 a lot in the last episode. It was a episode to lead us to this episode, build up to this episode. And this episode was the perfect thing to come after that episode. It works so well. I mean, I said last time the last one was the Endor episode of this Last of Us, and episode 5 definitely was the culmination, and so much happened. So let's get right into it. Episode 5 of The Last of Us starts with us in the past as Kansas City breaks down into chaos and rioting after the outbreak. They string up police officers by the necks, prompting the military to roll in with extra firepower. Among the survivors are Henry, played by Lamar Johnson, and Sam, Kevon Woodward, who keep their heads down and try to survive. With Fedra eventually stopped, Kathleen rounds up the townsfolk and belittles them. She goes on to tell them that she's not Fedra, but it's basically going to be the de facto dictator here. She also wants Henry, but everyone is silent about his whereabouts until a guy speaks up and claims he's outside, meeting with an informant where they have a safe area to hide out. This happens to be the attic we saw Kathleen head to last episode. Henry and Sam get cozy and decide to ration their gear. Henry believes they'll have 11 days, but Sam is scared. Henry tries to calm him down, encouraging the little guy to draw on the walls. So I absolutely loved this first part, showing kind of the aftermath of what happened after Fedra was being taken over. Even in a world like this, where you have a revolution that comes through to take over the bad guys, sometimes that revolution ends up being just as bad, if not worse, as the people they overthrew. So that was crazy to see to start this episode. What I love about this show is like each episode has like a contained theme. Like, yes, overarching theme of the entire thing is love, but in this episode specifically, it really touches on the idea of violence and trauma and just the raw violence that can happen when you love somebody enough that you would do anything for them. Because you see it in the way that they kill all the Federer people. You see it in what Melanie is willing to do to go after Henry. You see it in what the infected will do to get more to reproduce. You see what it will do with Joel, what he would do to save Ellie, and Henry too. Just the brutality that can come out of love.
I like how they do actually have a theme within a theme per episode. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, because that overarching theme is definitely something we see in the games, especially I would say in the second one. So I think it's really cool that they are really hammering that message home in the TV show, because it's something that I really enjoyed in the game. So seeing that really be played out on an episodic level is really cool to see. Let me just back up. Actually, I rewatched episode 4 and then watched episode 5 directly after. So I watched them back to back, and it really was like watching a film. As we're kind of mentioning, Nick, episode 4 definitely was a setup for episode 5, but watching them back to back, it really felt very connected. And I really enjoyed that, in episode 5 here, we get to see the events happening with Joel and Ellie from a different perspective. We get to see it from Sam and Henry's perspective, like them crashing the car into that pharmacy or whatever, and those events taking place. And it kind of explains then why they want to connect with Joe and Ellie, because they see that, oh yeah, these are some tough people that know how to handle themselves. So I really enjoyed just kind of seeing the same events play out, but from a different perspective, and in doing so, kind of setting up those characters at the same time. And then I really liked, Paige, you kind of pointed it out, I think last week, that Sam was painting those figures and that he had the paint on himself. And we kind of get to see a little bit more of that in this episode as well. The big thing that I really loved is the change from the video game and making Sam deaf. Like that was so different than the game. They also made him a little bit younger in this show, I think. And I think that combination of making that character younger and deaf made Sam look to Henry for more guidance on an even deeper level than in the game.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about casting, specifically about Kevon Woodward. So when Craig Mazin came in, he talked to Neil Druckmann and was like, hey, I have this idea. Maybe we should make Sam deaf instead. Maybe change Sam's character a little bit, make him deaf. And Neil said, I hate you. I wish that I had done that. So when the other part is that Craig Mazin also wanted to make Sam a little bit younger, and the reason for that was so that Ellie could be somebody that he looked up to, which makes it at the end of the episode even more just heartbreaking what happens at the end, because they have this relationship where Sam looks up to Ellie, and now Ellie has somebody, because again, she wants to be just like Joel. She has somebody that she now has to take care of as well, or feels like she has to take care of. What's also really cool about the casting is that because it was so specific, because the actor had to be deaf and had to be really young, 8, 9, 10 years old, they were having a huge amount of trouble trying to find the perfect actor. They went through their casting department couldn't find anybody, and so Craig Mazin finally just put out a call on Twitter, of all places, just calling for young actors who were deaf and really young, and that's how they found Kevon Woodward. This is his first time in a major motion picture, major film role, major TV show role, and he absolutely killed it. Like, I thought that he was the standout of this episode, and he really is deaf.
When I watched him during the episode, I could tell that he was a newer actor, but that actually helped with how his innocence and his awareness, it fit really well together. Like, he was a newbie actor, being deaf, it just made sense and it fit. So I give him props, and he did an awesome job for his first major role.
Yeah, because I feel like child actors just in general don't always work so well.
Well, they say do not work with animals and children. Those are like the 2 rules in film.
Yeah, I mean, like, even without those obstacles, this actor came in and just knocked this role out of the park in this episode.
I also wanted to mention that the showrunners actually hired CJ Jones for this episode to be the dialect coach and the director of ASL, American Sign Language, for this episode. CJ is awesome. He's worked in a lot of different productions. His breakout role, and really where we would probably all know him from, is in Baby Driver. He was the foster parent of the main character in Baby Driver. He also developed the Na'vi sign language for Avatar 2, The Way of Water. So this guy is awesome. And what was really cool on set, if you waited till after the episode to see the behind the scenes stuff, is that CJ Jones really tried to make the entire set, tried to teach everybody on set a bit of ASL so that they could interact with each other, kind of get to know a little bit more of what it's like to have to speak through American Sign Language. Lamar Johnson, who played Henry, had never done ASL up to this point, and so he had to learn, and he did really well. So I just thought that it was really awesome that they created an environment on set to make sure that it was a very inclusive environment, especially for this first-time actor in Kevon Woodward.
I could tell that Lamar actually practiced probably a lot to make it more fluent, because a lot of deaf people and hearing impaired, you can tell when someone's not deaf when you're watching shows, because they don't use the facial expressions, they don't use the mouth movements. I took ASL for 1 year and I'm still terrible at it. And I give everyone props for learning.
I mean, Chris, isn't your sister like a fluent in ASL?
Yeah, that's what she's going to school for. So she's like going to graduate end of this year. So I'd hope so.
So moving on, Perry believes that they should wait as they have a perimeter already and should regroup, but Kathleen belittles him and talks down to the military man, telling him to move now and to burn the bodies when they're done, as it's faster than putting them on trial. Fast forward 10 days and both Sam and Henry are down to their last can of food. With their informant gone and no food left, the pair decide to head out and make it on foot. The pair are about to leave when suddenly they hear gunshots raining down outside. It's the tiny shootout inside the department store, the one with the 3 people we saw earlier in the last chapter with Joel and Ellie. Henry notices Joel inside and the pair change their plans. They head to the apartment complex, and that catches up to the end of episode 4. Henry tells Joel and Ellie that he wants to join hands with them and believes that they should help one another out. Henry lowers his gun and decides to trust them as the 4 begin to work together. So I thought it was a perfect segue into the last episode. And like you were saying, Chris, really cool to see the same story play out from a different perspective. And we did see them actually sneak up on Joel because he, again, couldn't hear.
I really enjoyed the attic scene. I like to see Henry try to still keep the humanity in Sam alive with like drawing pictures and making sure that everything's going to be okay, protecting him, even though it's like in the worst possible scenario you could be in. You could tell the bond between them was super close. So it was very cute to see that.
Yeah, I wanted to say about that scene too is we're seeing this play over and over, the relationships, how they relate to Joel and Ellie, because the relationship between Henry and Sam is a little bit similar, because Henry would do anything to protect Sam, not only just protect Sam physically from getting hurt or shot or killed or anything, but also his innocence. He's trying to protect Sam's innocence as much as possible and trying to protect Sam from the scary stuff. He doesn't want Sam to be scared. That's something we see all over and over, and it plays up till the last moments of the episodes where, I mean, we have that scene with Sam and Ellie, and Sam says, "Don't you get scared too?" It's just, oh, it's so heartbreaking, and it's just so cool to see like the similarities of the relationship. And again, what Henry will do for Sam, the lengths that he will go to protect the person that he loves the most.
Yeah, and kind of fusing those two thoughts that you guys had together, you know, when they first get to that attic, the doctor is there and he tells him, hey, you got to put on more of a brave face for your brother. You know, you got to show him that things are okay, because, and as an audience member, as a good reminder too, like Sam can't hear what's going on. So he's basing, you know, his reaction and how he's moving forward. He's basing all that on his brother and his brother's reactions. And that includes, you know, being stoic, putting a good face on things. So I really liked that. And I did kind of, you know, rewatching the 2 episodes back to back, I kind of felt more the loss of the character of the Doctor and the importance that he was playing when it came to Sam and Henry's characters up until that point in the story, because, you know, Sam seemed to have at least some kind of attachment with that character, you know, as they were hanging out in that attic for, 10 days or whatever. And, you could tell that he was worried and he was sad, when his brother had to tell him that he probably wasn't coming back.
Absolutely. And can we talk about real quick, in a world in which there are clickers that cannot see, but they have superhuman hearing, the worst person you can be is somebody who is deaf. And all you can do is use sign. I mean, yes, it's the best and the worst person, because a deaf person doesn't have to talk to communicate, but it's the worst person when, like, Sam is trying to get Henry's attention and is banging on stuff like that. I thought that might play a little bit more later on with some clickers or something. It didn't, but it just added to some of that tension. And it reminds me too of the character of Connie in The Walking Dead. I mean, there's a perfect episode near the end that just shows the just terrifying nature of being a deaf person in a post-apocalyptic world with things coming after you. So I thought that was really interesting.
Was that part that I was like, was that part where she was in the house?
Yep. In the walls of the house.
That was literally such a weird episode to be on The Walking Dead. It was like weird cannibal people crawling all over the place. I was not expecting it at all.
But also one of the most terrifying episodes.
Some freaky shit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anything crawling towards you, I'm going to run away.
The evolution of humans. Yeah.
So Sam and Ellie strike up a friendship as the four formulate a plan together to get out of the killer city. Henry wants to help Joel and Ellie get out, as he too can benefit from this, pointing an unloaded gun is the closest he's come to violence, or so he says. So he needs Joel's ruthlessness to get them to get out of the city. That's easier said than done, though, when Kathleen controls everything, including the 4 highways around the city. There's also apparently no infected either, as 15 years back, they were all driven underground into the tunnels, the same underground that Henry and Sam intend to go down in order to sneak past the soldiers. The Fedra guy Henry was trusting apparently cleared the whole place out with his guys 3 years back, but it's still a tricky plan relying on sketchy intel. Joel is not convinced. The 4 make it down to the maintenance tunnels. The area includes an old community that seems to have settled underground after Outbreak Day. Joel and Ellie find old comic books and end up talking together. Ellie and Henry believe it's a good idea to stick around and play for a bit, so Joel allows them to do that. While they do, Henry admits that he wasn't open about his killing earlier. It turns out Sam got sick with leukemia, and the only drug that made him better was being held by Fedra. So the leader of the Kansas City Resistance, and apparently Kathleen's brother, ended up getting killed in the process of getting the medicine. I loved this part.
Yes, I absolutely love this part too, especially when it was in like a daycare setting too. And then they spilt their feelings and they were playing over there and they were having a grown-up conversation. But knowing that he also had leukemia, you couldn't tell, obviously. Sometimes you just can't tell when they have cancer, but it made you fall for the characters even more, knowing that Henry is doing all that he can, even if it was a bad thing that he did.
And I just love the fact that they threw in leukemia as that's the worst thing that has happened to him. It's not his disability that makes him weaker. It is the leukemia. Also, putting it in the daycare center just makes what happens later even scarier and crazier. And I just loved that little detail. Again, Chris, as you've been saying, this whole podcast is the little details, how specific they get with the world building and the details put in here.
Yeah. And, I liked that, Ellie and Sam were bonding over the comics, like, oh, you have this edition or these editions. I have these ones.
So is the comic a callback to the video game?
I low-key cannot remember the exact comic books from the game, but I know endure and survive are very common slogans besides find the light or whatever. But having Sam show Ellie how to sign, endure, and survive. I was like, I want to learn that. I also have it tattooed on me too. So I'm like, I gotta learn it somehow.
So does Neil Druckmann, apparently.
See, we're twinning.
When I liked that Paige, as people that have played the game, at least I was viewing it as like endure and survive. Yeah, that's so cool. And then they kind of poke fun at it a little bit. It's like, oh, that's endure and survive. That's some redundant shit.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah.
It was funny how they brought that in there. And I don't even know if that comic book was even in the games, but I'm glad they threw it in there to explain endurance and survival.
It makes a perfect place for that to make sense and not be super cheesy and just out of place. And also it really helps to drive Sam's character too, and also to connect Ellie and Sam. So putting that comic book, whether it's in the game or not, was the perfect choice. Also, can we talk about these tunnels? Like, I love what this show does to just ramp up the tension of an episode without actually having to have a crazy infected scene, attack scene, or whatever. Like, you don't need to have them being chased in these tunnels, even though, quote, quote, the tunnels have already been cleared. Like, I was expecting there to be an infected, like, just pop around the corner. Maybe there'd be one or two in there, but there wasn't. And that was exactly the right choice, because it just ramps up the tension more and more and more till finally, when it finally does happen, it just is even more terrifying. So
I'm super happy they did that, especially that they didn't like do any jump scares, because jump scares bother me so much because they don't scare. They're corny. And what are you trying to provide right there?
They're the most overused and the easiest way to scare an audience. And it's lazy.
It's cheap. Yeah, it's just cheap and lazy.
So give us a long tunnel. And I like how they edited it too. It kind of was like a fade in, fade out. We don't know how long they were walking. It just gave you a good indicator on how long. But things like this from the game, you're walking in these tunnels, then you make your way to a room and you're like, shit, there's going to be a ton of ammo in here. And now we have to go kill something in the next room. So I think that was kind of like a nice little stopping point, was the daycare center before they have to go do their thing.
Also, I loved in the daycare center the fact that they decided to put a dark tunnel in the other corner. I thought totally that something was going to pop out of that dark tunnel.
It's keeping you on the edge of your seat the whole time. Yeah,
exactly. I love it. Kathleen is completely unhinged after killing the city's doctor last episode and belittling all of her officers. She next goes missing and heads back to her childhood room, the one her brother occupied before he was killed. Despite her brother telling her not to seek justice and revenge, Kathleen intends to do just that. So the thing I want to note here is that Henry was responsible for Kathleen's brother's death because he was saving his own brother because of Sam's leukemia. I mean, these are decisions that love makes, not morality or rationality. I mean, how many people will you burn for love? The other part is that Kathleen's brother was her Joel, and her Joel died. And when her Joel died, she lost it and went after the people that killed her Joel. Another note is that her brother was the good one. He was the one who fought for fairness and mercy, but that's not Kathleen. To her, forgiveness is like stupid, and punishment is the only justice for the years of Fedra torture. I mean, then Perry says, your brother was a great man. We all loved him, but he didn't change anything. You did. And that just validated her violence even more and really freed her to the bitter end.
That scene really made me hate her some more, I think. She is creepy, and her little soft, delicate customer service voice is weird.
No, but I think, like you guys were saying, like Kathleen was a loved sister, and she loved her brother. And again, like you're kind of saying, Nick, like the consequence of pain and love is something that is definitely a theme that they're really hitting home in this show. And I like that Kathleen, she shares that she knew what her brother would want, and that would be to forgive. But she says, basically, where would that get me? What would that do for me at this point? And so she takes that path of vengeance, and as we kind of get to see, like everyone is like, hey, you brought us here and we're supporting you all the way. So whatever you say goes, which is, I think, where things can get a little dangerous.
And the main theme of the games and then part 2 is literally vengeance and love. Love is a little above vengeance, but it's a recurring theme that we have seen.
Joel's group makes it out of the tunnels and through to the other city. Only there's a problem. There's a sniper up in the building across the way, and Joel is forced to try and get the jump on him and head around the back. When he finally gets in the house, he finds an old man who happens to be working with Kathleen. Unfortunately, Kathleen and her group show up in their masses. Joel uses the sniper to take out the truck driver while Kathleen's group stand outside the house. Kathleen is absolutely fine with killing kids too and admits as such in front of her group. When Henry, unable to reason with her, decides to face her head to head, he commands Ellie to hit the killer shot. Now, all this time, we have Joel with his sniper rifle, but just before he fires, the ground suddenly caves in, a guttural snarl comes forth, and masses of infected just charge out and charge Kathleen's group. Most of the infected are stopped, but there's something much bigger that comes out from the fire. We finally see our big boy bloater. It makes short work of Kathleen's group and absolutely destroys Perry, while Kathleen doesn't make it much farther as she is also killed. Ellie is protected by Joel from his vantage point as she runs and finally saves Sam and Henry.
I think this was such an enjoyable part of the episode because...
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Because it shows Joel's military background, because he's a real good shot. It shows how much you can see it in his face, how much he wants to save Ellie during this part. The infected and the creepy ass little kids that come crawling over. It kind of explains that even in a post-apocalyptic world, there's still children and they're going to be infected. So I'm glad they showed how it affects everyone. And I want to give props to that 9-year-old who literally scared the shit out of me in that van, crawling over the seats to Ellie. I'm like, I wanted to rewatch it multiple times just because it freaked me out.
So we got to shout out Skye Cowton for that role of the little girl. They hired a child contortionist for this role. All of those movements are real in camera for the most part. There was a little bit of CGI work just to enhance the prosthetics, but all that movement is real. So creepy. And also just the addition of the Blue's Clues shirt also contrasts the innocence and horror of this character and just shows the devastating fact that no one is safe. And also I had to question here, was this one of the little girls who used to live in the tunnels that Joel, Henry, Ellie, and Sam were resting in earlier?
I'm assuming so, because she was almost like half clicker at this point. And I'm glad a little kid was the one that killed Kathleen, because she is willing to kill kids. So it was a nice little parallel that happened, and the way that she just jumped from the back. I was pretty proud of that moment. I'm like, Kathleen is dead now. Good.
Now, let's finally get to the big bloater. We've been talking about seeing a bloater this entire podcast, and we finally get to see one. And just the reveal of him was just so perfect. So for this entire scene, production hired a movement coach, and they also had a 3-week boot camp just to get the movements right for all of the infected. And the bloater's costume weighed 88 pounds atop 6'6" stuntman Adam Basil, and it took 5 hours in the makeup chair to finish. Then Weta Digital came in, added a little bit of CGI work, but the majority, like 99% of that bloater was true to camera. And just, again, it just showcases Barry Gower's prosthetic work here. It was perfect.
I read somewhere that it costs like $500,000 to create. That sounds a little obnoxious, but I'm assuming it's correct. And also, between you and Chris, it would there's a lot of people that were asking me at work because they're all watching the show, what is a bloater? So it'd be kind of good to explain what they are to people that don't really understand the concept and how they're formed. So I would have to Google it again, but I know that they're the ones that were 20 plus years. They're the ones that got infected first and they just got that, what is it, outer fungus shell?
No, yeah, that's basically it. Like they've been around a long time and they kind of have that shell that's obviously bulletproof. RIP to Jeffrey Pierce's head getting plucked off. But yeah, that's basically it.
Well, from what I've heard from researching for this episode, apparently the majority of people, if they aren't very strong, then they will usually just be absorbed and eaten by the fungus until they are absorbed back into the earth or absorbed, like we saw, into the wall in episode 2. But the bloaters are the strongest of the humans and the tallest of the humans. They are able to be strong enough that when the fungus takes over, it doesn't consume all of them to the point where then all the other things just start growing around them, making them harder and harder and harder and more bulletproof. So they are the strongest and the tallest and the biggest of the humans to be able to withstand living through the ravages of the fungus, and it just makes them stronger. That's what I heard.
And I kind of liked that we don't see the bloater get killed. It kind of puts it out to us as an audience member that they're very indestructible, which I liked. And I just kind of wanted to back up. Yeah, that child collector was pure nightmare fuel, 100%. That was creepy AF. I kind of almost wanted to back up a little bit more to the part of the episode where Joel's like, oh, this guy's got shit for aim. Let me go take him out. And then when he gets up there, we see this older man with the sniper rifle. And Joel says, please don't. You know, and I was kind of like thinking about this after the fact, but, you know, a lesser show would have done something like have Joel say, look, 10 days ago, I would have come up in here and shot you without any hesitation, but I've been having some character development lately and I'm now not wanting to blow your head off. But we see Joel, you know, give this man a choice. And I think at least my interpretation of the events was that this character, the older gentleman, he didn't want to live anymore. And I think that's why he forces Joel to kill him. But I really enjoyed that scene because that's not in the game at all. We kind of got to see more of that humanity behind what's happening.
I mean, would you? I mean, this guy was probably at the start of this thing 20 years ago. He was probably just gearing down at the end of his career, getting ready to go into retirement, get ready to settle down. And then boom, suddenly finds himself in the later stages of his life, just in the apocalypse. Like, what a way to spend your retirement. Am I right?
He didn't have any facial expression and he didn't even say anything either, which made it more of like I don't want to say suicide, but he, like Chris said, he didn't really care. He's just wanted to finish the job that he was trying to do. Yeah.
And I also liked when Henry is offering to come out from behind the car and he's like, hey, you know, if I come out, we let the kids leave. And I really loved Kathleen's delivery of, no, I'm not going to let the kids leave if you come out. It was just very like so dismissive. And I think it really showcased, you know, how she really didn't give a shit about anything anymore. And as we were kind of talking about earlier, you know, with that scene in the room, you know, I think she basically is saying here, you know, you did everything you had to do to protect your brother, but at what costs? You know, my brother is dead because of the decisions that you made to protect yours, and so many other people have suffered as a result of what you did, Henry. I think, you know, the game definitely and the show really dives into the perspectives on things at times, which I personally find super interesting because it really makes you take a few steps back and look on things a little bit differently at the end of the day.
Because yes, Kathleen is definitely a bad person just in general, but she's doing it from a place that is superhuman. And we see this over and over. It's not black and white.
Yeah, I like that in this world, we kind of get to live in the gray. I think that's, at least personally for me, that's the kind of characters that I really love to explore.
And not just the gray, but the humanity of it. Because we can see gray in a lot of other shows and stuff, but everything is motivated from what would actually a person do, just a normal person, because a normal person isn't born bad. They only become bad by the choices that they make and the things that are put in the way and the circumstances that are put before them that make them bad. And that's what we see in this show. And I haven't seen that in hardly any other shows. That's what I love so much about this. It's not just gray, it's human.
And the script that she had during that part that Chris was talking about with between Kathleen and Henry, when she said that maybe he was supposed to die. Kids die all the time, every day or something like that, which is something you don't really hear in shows either when they talk about kids' death. They really slapped that in your face and was like, you could tell how hurt she was losing her brother just for a little kid type thing. So I thought that was interesting that they put that in there. Also very dark, which was, the whole world's dark. So I get why they did that.
Yeah, I mean, she's so filled with a rage for vengeance against Henry. She is willing to sacrifice anybody for her goals. I mean, that's what happens with Perry. She basically is like, you take care of this thing. I'm going to go get Henry. I'm not going to even care about trying to kill any of these other infected people. I'm just have this sole mission. And it's her broken moral compass that she believes is her strength ultimately leads to her demise, because it is when she goes after Henry that she doesn't just run away. She goes after Henry, and it's because she doesn't run away that she ultimately turns her back towards the violence, and that's what consumes her, and literally consumes her in the form of a nightmare-fueled child infected
Blue's Clues wearing
clicker.
Man, if some little girl wears that for Halloween this year, it's going to be terrifying. You imagine them just running at you, going trick-or-treating?
As a big old nope.
God, it'd be terrifying.
The other scene I really liked in this chain of events was when Joel is picking people off and clickers off with that rifle up in the watchtower. You know, we do that in the game as well, but it just felt so much more intense in the show. And I really, really loved that. And as you were I think you were saying, Paige, like, you know, we really see that he's super concentrated. You see that he's really putting into action I think what's turning into care and love for Ellie in a protective manner. And that was one of my favorite scenes, I think, this whole season, honestly.
You also see just how desperate he is to save her, because he's not there. He's not beside her. He's in such a vulnerable position himself. And he sees that Ellie is also in such a vulnerable position because he's not by her side anymore. And you just see his desperation in how he's picking everything off one by one. Just he wants to be by her side, but all he has is the gun in his hand. And so he uses what he has to make sure that she's okay.
And it's a good scene to show how Ellie is not scared. I mean, she's scared, but she's not scared to protect the ones that she's befriending or starting to care for. And taking out that switchblade and getting real close and stabbing them. It shows the Ellie that we know and love in the games too. So I think they did a good job.
Yeah, because she's leading Henry and Sam out, basically.
Yeah.
And we do it in such a way that it actually makes sense, because for her character development, she just isn't suddenly a master at killing things. It's taken us to this point, and it takes a desperation in her to protect somebody to actually get her to kind of throw caution to the wind and go and save people to be just like Joel.
I just enjoyed that, you know, after we got to see the sniper that was up in the watchtower be such a terrible shot. Now we got to see Joel with his military background just picking people and clickers off. So sick. Loved it.
With the fighting over, the four managed to find a safe refuge away from the carnage in an abandoned motel. Joel encourages Sam and Henry to join them on their way to Wyoming, but there's a problem. We find that Sam is infected. He was bitten and the infection is spreading. Ellie agrees to stay up with Sam, but he ends up turning in the middle of the night. The infected Sam jumps on Ellie and tackles her to the ground while Henry is forced to kill Sam in cold blood. He's in a state of shock and unable to deal with the grief. He turns the gun on himself and fires. As Joel buries Henry and Sam outside the next morning, Ellie leaves a message for Sam on his whiteboard saying, "I'm sorry." And Joel and Ellie start on foot towards Wyoming again. Oh,
I know.
the show does such a good job and terrible job at just hitting you where it hurts so much, because we have only seen Sam for 90 minutes, if that, and now the writing is so good that we fall in love with the character and it just rips our hearts out when they're taken from us. And the thing I want to note here the most was, I thought the most genius moment in this episode was when Ellie wakes up from accidentally falling asleep. She had promised Sam that she was going to stay up with him all night long, and she wasn't able to do that. And that when she wakes up, she sees that Sam is sitting with his back to Ellie. But what I thought was genius is the reason that he's turned away from her is because I'm pretty sure halfway through the night when she finally did fall asleep, he saw her fall asleep and he said he knew that that was it. And so he turned away from her because he knew that if he turned, he would still be deaf. He thought if he turned, he would still be deaf, so that when he did turn, he would not hear her. Because if he saw her, she would have killed her in her sleep. She would have bitten her in her sleep. But he wanted to save her from himself. And so he turned away so that he wouldn't hear her when he turned.
I like that. I didn't honestly think about that when I saw it either. I just took it as more of an internal.
After the episode, I actually went back and I rewatched a clip of how that all goes down in the game. And I think they really emotionally upped the ante quite a bit, in the show. And, as someone who has played the games, I was thinking like, man, are they going to change it up here and not have Sam and Henry die? Because that's just how good of a job they did in introducing us to these characters and, making it all sound like, hey, we're going to go to Wyoming together. It's all going to be positive vibes all the way.
They've made so many creative decisions that stray away from the storyline of the game so far, that wouldn't they just be nice to us and just change that one detail? Of course they wouldn't.
Are they really going to have the characters die again? It feels like, we have one significant character die every episode. But I also really wanted to touch on how I thought that the writing and the acting, how they did such a great job of showcasing Ellie and Sam's relationship in this episode. And as you kind of referenced already, when Sam asks Ellie, "Are you still you inside when you turn?" I just really emotionally was like connecting with that moment. And yeah, I think too, kind of jumping to when Henry, has to take out Sam, and then Joel is there, and he's like, "Hey, give me the gun." 'Cause I at least how I was thinking about is Joel's gone through something similar. He's seen his daughter die, and he may have had thoughts of ending his life that occurred. And so I think he's starting to jump into action to try and prevent that from potentially happening for Henry in that moment.
But from Henry's point of view, it's just heartbreaking because Sam was also Henry's self-worth.
And his purpose. Yeah.
Henry, like Bill and Frank and starting to be Joel and Ellie, his entire being, of course, is to protect Sam. That's what led him to kill Kathleen's brother. And when Sam dies in a way which he could not have prevented, and because his conscience is telling him that he's already a murderer, a collaborator, he no longer sees a reason to live. And I think that it is the shock that he never saw coming that his little brother was going to turn because he didn't know Sam had been bit that leads him to just take his own life. And I think that even shooting himself might have just been instinctual. It may not have even been a choice for him. And I think the acting kind of really showcased potentially that being the option, that it really wasn't an intentional choice to kill himself, because it wasn't intentional for him to kill his brother either. He did it because there was something going to attack. And in the heat of the moment, he just instinctively shot at something attacking another human being, not knowing that it was his brother. And because now his brother is gone, instinctually, without even making a choice, he then shoots himself.
Yeah, because acting was so good. You're able to gather all that information just from those 12 seconds.
Milliseconds, really.
Yeah. Like we gather all of that from the acting. And I think that's, again, like showcasing how well they've casted, and then how those actors and actresses have delivered on their script, on the writing in the show. Because it's one thing to have like really good writing, but it's also another to pair that with actors who can really hit it home and deliver.
I don't think that they could have done a better job at casting pretty much every single character in this show so far.
I agree.
He just felt like he failed and couldn't be Sam's superhero anymore. So obviously he wanted to. I mean, I know it happened so quickly. He probably didn't even want to kill himself. He just had that urge and just did it because he was so shocked. But that's how it kind of was in the game. So I don't know how they would have made it into more of a storyline with them two. We all knew it was coming. It was just hurting more than it did in the game, I think.
Well, originally, in the original script, Craig Mazin said that the decision was that Henry did not die in the original script. But as they got closer and closer through everything, and Neil Druckmann really like played back on the fact that it all was leaning, every single path they went down for the narrative of this episode did lead to only one conclusion.
As much as I love Sam and Henry, I don't think the story would play out the way it should with Henry tagging along. He would have to die somehow. Maybe they could have put him in some other episodes, but not that I wanted them to die. It was a good way to end the episode.
Oh, it wasn't a good way to end the episode. Like, there was nothing good about that, but it was the only way this episode could have ended for the narratives of Joel and Ellie moving forward, for their characters. Ellie needed to have this kind of loss.
It was not a good way to end the episode.
And the last little thing that I picked up only from memes on the internet, apparently Henry's backpack is the backpack that Joel had in The Last of Us Part 2.
I did not pick that up. That's real cool if that's true.
Did not catch that either.
It's a leather backpack, and it's on his back when they're walking in the last shot away from camera. And apparently that's from Part 2.
Oh, yeah, because his other backpack was like green and apocalyptic. It was all roughed up and stuff.
Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. So as always, if there's anything that we skipped over, missed, didn't get to that you wanted to bring up, now is the time to do that.
One thing that I have started seeing on just like Instagram, Facebook, any type of, because I follow everything The Last of Us, HBO, Entertainment Weekly, whatever. I'm seeing a lot of people get pissed off that the episodes or like the show is moving too quickly, and it's like each episode is a different, you meet someone, they die, they meet someone, they die, which is true, but they do it so well that it doesn't feel like that. I don't think these people really understand that this is a game adaptation, and you're going to meet a ton of people and you have to have their narrative played out. So I'm just stating that they're doing it very well. And it's not too fast. I don't personally think it's too fast.
I agree that I think the pacing of this show is perfect, because there are other shows that went on way too long, and
Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead is one of them. That's exactly what I was about to say. The Walking Dead is absolutely that. It was too long. It was too slow. I am guilty of this. I want to spend every second, or as many seconds as I can, in this world. Like I've said before, insert it straight into my veins. But HBO at this point has already greenlit season 2. We know that. They would probably greenlight up to 5, 6, 7 seasons if they could. But would that be the best for the story that they're trying to tell? I don't think so.
Oh, I don't think so either, because I think each episode is like a little mini movie. It all has a beginning, middle, end, and it's a good flow. So I think if it was like any longer, people would get bored because they'd be like, shit, this is another post-apocalyptic show that's just going to drag on. They're going to go scavenging. They're going to find anything. Someone's going to die. It would just be so bad.
And I think what Craig Mazin understands as a showrunner and a creator more than pretty much anybody else is how valuable something that is short-lived is. A perfect example is his last show, Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a limited series. It was only one season of that, only about 6 to 8 episodes. I forget exactly how many. But that show was so special because we didn't get a season 2. We're not going to get a season 2, but it doesn't need one. And that's what makes it so special. And I think that he understands that, especially with this show too, is that we want more, but they're not going to give us more, which makes it that more precious.
Yeah, great way to put it, Nick. Because I know I was kind of questioning, in episodes 1 and 2, like, oh, are they going to really cover the whole first game in season 1, which they are, and we know that now. But yeah, no, I'm really enjoying the pacing. And even I was seeing criticism from episode 4 where people weren't happy with it because it wasn't like the other episodes where it's really hitting home. Nick. But something else I really wanted to touch on quick was I really enjoyed, and it was a good reminder for me, I think, that Ellie is a kid in the show, in this world. She's like trying to do some kind of blood transfusion because she's like, oh, I know I have some kind of cure in me, but I don't know how that works. So maybe this is how it works. Let me try this. And then when they're digging those graves at the end, I think that we really emotionally feel that just because we were shown Ellie trying to share of herself with somebody and cure them. And I think that's partially why she says, I'm sorry on that board when they're walking away. Because she feels like she failed. Because
the thing that sets her apart from everybody else in this world is apparently her blood is special, but it wasn't in this case.
Right, or at least wasn't in the right form. And I guess like my main closing thought for the show that like we didn't get to, I kind of wanted to share is I feel like a lot of other dystopian shows, there's some kind of hope that everyone's clinging on to. Like I know we bring up The Walking Dead a lot, so as an example, in that show, they're constantly working toward keeping their towns in place and continuing to build communities, wherein in The Last of Us, there's an acceptance with most people that the world is gone as they know it. And there isn't any hope of things being any kind of normal again. And I think that's why when we as an audience get to see characters like Tess, show hope in Ellie being the cure, or we get to see Frank and Bill's love story, blossom in the middle of this world, this reality now, that those things really stand out to us as an audience so much because they're examples of going against the grain of how everyone else's lives and perspectives are being shown in this reality. I really think that lends itself to making the show as great as it is.
I could not have said it any better, so I'm not. So with that, I want to say I love this episode, and let us, before we go, as always, hit us with where we can find y'all on social media.
Well, as we all know, my Instagram handle is @RacerXGirl, which will never change. It's stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you guys want to connect or shoot me a message, hit me up on Instagram at christophers.snap.shots. Or look me up on Facebook.
And as always, you can find me at nick.flito.leach. Well, that about does it for this week's episode. Join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/group/the Cinema Club TCC and listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Anchor, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And leave us a review on iTunes because it really does help us reach more listeners and get even more members to the club. Message me on Facebook if you would like to be a part of the podcast. And finally, we just launched a brand new support option on our channel. So if you're loving the show and feeling a little generous, please consider supporting the show so we can make sure the life of this thing just continues to grow. And like we've teased before, we have some big plans going forward to make sure that we're more consistent with our content. So just keep an eye out and an ear open for more announcements as we get closer to launching the next phase of this podcast. So with that, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you on the next one.